Welcome to another episode of our live stream, My Journey to the Trinity. And as has been the case before, such an honor and a privilege to have with us New York Times best-selling author, Robert Spencer. Welcome, Brother Robert. It's great to have you on today.
Always good to talk to you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Robert, there's several things that I kind of like to have you come on every now and then, just to kind of give us a reality check, because we watch the news and the media. The media is just so happy right now, and I feel the warmth that I haven't felt from them in such a long time. And so, especially with, the Joe Biden administration, with the reapproachment towards Iran and these types of things. And so I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of a broad view from you of how you see things going since Joe Biden has come into office, especially in regard to issues regarding your website, Jihad Watch.
Well, I can tell you the good news is Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announced the other day that the jihad is over.
Oh.
So I'm going to close up shop pretty soon and start practicing the sax again and look for another line of work. I've been hoping for this for a long time, and it was great to hear it from him. But in all seriousness, he did say that after 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security, which was, of course, established at that time, was devoted to what he called foreign extremists, that is, jihadis. But now it was turning away from that and being much more mindful of domestic extremists, by which he unfortunately appears to mean anybody who dissents from the left. And so the jihad's over. So let's go bowling.
Wow, that's great news, man. In fact, I think that'll be the name of my my live stream today, because that's more than I could have expected. Every time you come on, it's there's always something unexpected, and to hear jihad is over is really great. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I'm going to pop open the champagne later on, and it's going to be a fantastic evening. It's all over.
Wow. So, okay. Well, I guess I'll go back to delivering pizzas, because that's what I was doing before, so, well.
Okay, make mine with pepperonis, and I'll expect you about 6.
I'm sorry, I only do halal pizzas. I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. I don't eat pork still. I still have a hard time with bacon and ham, but I do eat pepperoni. That's the one thing that got in. So, hey, I wanted to tell me about this person.
Pharaoh Sanders? I didn't expect to see him today. This is the second straight show I've been on where they bring up Pharaoh Sanders. And I think Mr. Sanders, if he knows this, he must be deeply embarrassed by the association. Pharaoh Sanders is the premier tenor saxophonist in the world today. And I know Wayne Shorter fans are going to be mad at me for saying that, but that's the way it is. I just report the truth. Pharaoh Sanders is a jazz musician, although he himself rejects the jazz label, and he has played in a wide variety of contexts, including a wonderful album with the Nawa musicians in Morocco, and playing with primarily led by Malim Mahmoud Ganya, recording an album called The Trance of Seven Colors, which is absolutely, I highly recommend it. Run, don't walk. But in any case, Pharaoh is a Muslim and a convert to Islam. He is from Little Rock, Arkansas, and is actually nicknamed Little Rock. And he is a longtime musician on the scene. He was in John Coltrane's last quintet in 1966 and 7. John Coltrane being one of the towering musicians of the 20th century, and Pharaoh has gone on since then to great things himself. So what makes you think of him?
Well, I was just I was just looking over some of your bio stuff yesterday, and I never knew about your musical side because I'm a musician too, and I think I'm a rock star. Nobody agrees with me, but I think so.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that one of the best albums, actually maybe the best album that Pharaoh Sanders has recorded, is called Summun Bukmun Umyun, Deaf, Dumb, Blind, quotation from Quran chapter 2, verse 18. Yes.
Wow.
Pardon my pronunciation, but in any case, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The Quran says the unbelievers are deaf, dumb, and blind. And if you read the liner notes to that album, which is absolutely magnificent and stunning in every way, he says this music is dedicated to the enlightenment of the kafirun.
Okay.
Yeah. So here I am, an infidel myself, and I was enlightened by the music indeed, but not perhaps in the way that Mr. Sanders would have hoped.
Well, it's funny that you should call yourself an infidel just within the first 5 minutes, but the I have another title.
The secret is out, my friend. People know already. Anyway, yes, you have another Murtad.
Morted, yes. And so I got that title. And I'm just, lately I've been looking at different videos. I'm sorry?
Mabruk.
Barik Fik. We're also what you call falahis. Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah.
Falahis, we speak with the in Palestine, the falahis speak with the ch instead of the k. Like for instance, the word kif halak. Egypt will say kif halak or Jordan but the falahis will say chief halak. So we say ch in place of k. That's one of the biggest differences in our language. And we're kind of considered the Hicks, they make fun of us. But anyway, so I'm really a chaff at, well, you are too, but the title Morted, I've just been looking up, just trying to get some guidance from our wise instructors about what should happen to me. Should I live? Should I die? And so anyway, I watched this video yesterday. I'd like to watch it with you. And I'd like to just kind of get I know you've heard of Shabir Ali. Have you heard of Shabir Ali?
Oh, I've heard a great deal of Shabir Ali, yes.
Okay. Well, here's some enlightenment from Shabir Ali about, whether I should have my head tomorrow or not. So.
From you, our viewers, if you have a question yourself, you can visit our website, www.quranspeaks.com. Okay, but the first question we have is about apostasy. So the question is, do you think a Muslim should be free to choose to leave Islam without fear of punishment from his mosque or his country's government? And should he be imprisoned or punished by being beaten, imprisoned, or executed?
The short answer is no, a Muslim should be free. I should be saying, I believe that a Muslim should be free to.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you about just that. He says, of course, a Muslim should be free. Well, then he says, but no, I should say, I believe a Muslim should be free.
Yes.
What did you see in between those two?
Well, I see that he is hedging his bets against people who are going to rebuke him within the Islamic community for contravening the death penalty for apostasy, for denying it. On the other hand, he can, of course, say that he was just devoting his efforts to deceiving the unbelievers and making us complacent so that we would not be aware of the threat that people like him face. But he had to hedge his bets a little bit. And it's interesting to note also that in saying, I believe, he's actually saying that he's not a Muslim himself, because Islamic law is that the apostate has to be put to death. If he's denying that, saying he believes something else, then he himself is an apostate.
You know what? That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yep.
And because here's the verse in Arabic: "Man baddala dino fa uqtilahu."
Yeah.
Who changes his religion?
Kill him.
Kill him. Here's I have it. Let me see if I got it in English. Oh, you know what? I removed the English version. But the English is from Sahih al-Bukhari, the #1 source of hadith. And it says, Muhammad says, whoever changes his religion, it doesn't say kill them, it says execute them. So, you know, got to be fair in my translation.
Judicial that way.
But that's exactly what I thought. He's a kafir. He's a kafir.
We're dealing with Shabir Ali, I have to say, in my experience with him, he's simply not an honest man. And so he doesn't hesitate to lie. He's after all, he's in Canada. He's surrounded by unbelievers, so he devotes his energies to deceiving them. But occasionally he has to be careful, because Muslims are not going to understand that that's the game he's playing, and they will say, how could you say this when the Prophet says the opposite? And so he has to dissemble a little bit.
Wow. All right, I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit more of this. It gets better. Oh, no, it doesn't get better, but
leave Islam if he or she wants to. This is the basic freedom that is guaranteed in the Islamic teachings and in the Quran itself.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Do you know where this basic freedom is guaranteed in the Islamic teachings and the Quran itself?
The man is lying. I'll tell you something. I am just finishing a book called The Critical Quran, which has a new translation of the Quran that is more honest than any other translation that exists in English today, that makes it very clear what's being said, when a lot of translations try to obscure what's being said, so that English-speaking non-Muslim readers don't really realize the import of what they're reading. You know, like strive hard in the way of Allah, which, you know, means take up arms against the unbelievers, but it just sounds like become more religious. Yeah. So in this endeavor, I am using the mainstream Muslim commentaries like Ibn Kathir, Qurtubi, Tabari, all of them, to explain what the mainstream Islamic understanding of the Quran is, and also to give what no Quran commentary has ever given, and that is variant readings from different manuscripts, all sorts of wonderful things coming in this book, The Critical Quran, that will be out late in the year. But the point is that I've been looking at the Quranic text very closely for the last few months, and I can tell you,
I'll tell you, this is so important what you're saying right now, because the belief is, oh, Muhammad said this in the Hadith, but the Quran is, oh, butterflies and, you know, freedom and First Amendment and everything. So I really want to hear what you got to say about this.
So not only is there not any passage, and I can tell you this, and anybody's invited to check, go ahead, read the book, see if you find it, but there is no passage in the Quran that says you are free to leave Islam. And on the contrary, there's chapter 4, verse 89 of the Quran, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which says that if they turn renegade, if they come join you, then accept them. That is, if they become Muslim, if they emigrate in the way of Allah, that is, they leave their homes and come to where the Muslims are, and they become Muslim, then that's all right. But if they turn renegade, if they leave after that, then hunt after them and kill them wherever you find them. And that is very clear, that what we're talking about is hunting down and killing people who have left Islam because they have left Islam. And there is no doubt about that when you look at the Hadith, the one that we quoted from Muhammad, whoever changes his religion, kill him. And when you look at how the commentators on the Quran, the ones that I mentioned before and others, how they understand that passage. And it's very clear that they take it for granted. They understand that there's a death penalty for leaving Islam, and they know that all their readers know that there's a death penalty for leaving Islam. And just one last thing about this before we go back to Shabir or whatever, and that is that Sheikh al-Qaradawi, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the most prominent Muslim cleric in the world today,
yes,
who had a TV show that was watched by millions discussing Islamic law, he was very clear that all the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, Sunni and Shia, all teach the death penalty for apostasy. And he even said, if there were no death penalty for apostasy, there'd be no Islam today.
You know what? dude, you're actually already getting into what Shabir Ali is going to say, because I don't think we're going to get through this video, because this thing is so preposterous. It is so hilarious what he's saying. And so, yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and listen to what he says next. This is hilarious.
That no punishment in the Quran is mentioned for a person leaving Islam. Punishment to be given in this life by the Muslim juridical courts.
So why do Muslims seem to think that?
You know what? I kind of respect the girl here, because she's saying, well, then why is this a question? Why is this an issue? You know, it's like
he doesn't like the question.
You know what? It reminds me of all these. You know the Islamic culture is very male oriented, and this reminds me of when Al Jazeera came out. The one good thing that came out about Al Jazeera is they had all those women, those feisty women, who are interviewing all these big sheikhs and these big government leaders, and they would sometimes get their hands around their necks, and it was awesome to see. So anyway, I really like the way she's pursuing this. At least she's asking a follow-up question, you know.
Maybe because she's his daughter, she feels like, well, he's not going to do anything. Of course, I don't know how that's any guarantee either, but anyway.
All right, let's listen to his response here. This is hilarious.
There is a mention in some hadiths that are reported or attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him. But if we use strict principles of interpreting Islam, first from the Quran, and then if a question is not answered from the Quran, then from the hadith, then we would have to give preference to the Quran in this regard, which guarantees the freedom of individuals. For example, Surah.
Okay, I wanted to ask about this. Have you ever heard of the strict principle? He said there's a strict principle that when the Quran says something and then the Hadith says something else. I mean, so the Quran is Allah speaking, the Hadith is Muhammad speaking. And so when Muhammad contradicts Allah, you go with Allah instead. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard that many times. And it's often used in this kind of apologetic context where people are trying, like Shabir Ali is trying here, to obscure what Islam really teaches. And so somebody quotes an inconvenient hadith and they say, oh, but you see, you don't understand because you don't know anything about Islam, but you're an ignorant, infidel Islamophobe. And so you don't know that the Quran takes precedence. And if the Quran and the hadith contradict, then the Quran always supersedes what the hadith says. And okay, that's great. Yes. However, that is not what is in play here, because there is no passage in the Quran that guarantees freedom of religion. And so the idea that what he's trying to give the impression of is that there's something in the Quran that says that you get freedom of religion, and so that means that the hadith where Muhammad says kill the people who leave Islam must not be in force. But the hidden premise here is that there is no such passage in the Quran. Now, I should address the particular objection that some people might be thinking right now, and that is, but what about chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran that says there's no compulsion in religion?
He's going to say that in a second here. So,
oh, well, there you go.
He's going to get it here in a minute. And I just wanted to say, just because you brought this up, I just want to say that I am not an Islamophobic, Islam hate, whatever. I'm just worried about my head. That's all, so because I don't know, because depending who you listen to, I don't know if I'll have my head by Saturday, but that's tomorrow. So anyway, so. And I just want to say one other thing. A lot of people say, hey, you've been a Christian 41 years, 42. Okay. What are you worried about? Nobody's cut your head off. And the thing I always got to come back to is the only reason I still have my head is because nobody has obeyed Muhammad yet.
Yes. Nobody
has obeyed these words right here. Man baddal dino fa uqtilahu. Just because someone hasn't obeyed it. And the problem is this isn't just about me. This isn't just about me.
Yeah.
This is about all ex-Muslims all over the world who really are being killed, who are being persecuted, who are being punished, who are being cast out, who are being thrown into the street because of, because of their decision to follow Christ. So I'm so fortunate that I'm in California. I don't know how fortunate because the sword of Islam is very long,
Yeah.
but at the same time, this isn't just about me. This is a very real issue, and everybody knows this hadith. Everybody knows this hadith. And so, it's one of those things. There's a lot of things in Islam that most Muslims don't know, but there's a lot of things they do know. And this is one of those things that everybody knows. And so it just adds to the danger. And most people won't do it, especially living in the West. But we know that there are lots who will do it. So anyway, let's go ahead and hear what this guy has to say here. So
18 says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants, let him believe. Whoever wants, let him disbelieve. Okay. Surah 2, verse 256 says, لَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ. There should be no compulsion in religion. And naturally, if you hold the death penalty of a person's head, then that person is not really free to leave the religion.
That's actually the false statement right there. And that's within an Islamic context, that the Quran does say there's no compulsion in religion, certainly, but the idea of compulsion is very different in an Islamic context. What he's saying there, that you're not really free if you have the death penalty over your head, that is not taken for granted in many areas. So that you have, for example, I can tell you a story of these two Fox News employees. One was a reporter and one was a photographer. This is about 10 years ago, maybe even longer. And they were kidnapped by a jihad group. And they made a video announcing they were converting to Islam.
Robert, I just want to say that was in the Gaza Strip. I was there. I was in the middle of the war that they were covering, and I watched the video where they came out and did their finger thing and said, "We fired to." I watched that. In fact, it was my friend. It was my friend who came up with that. He was doing the kidnapping, and he's the one who said, "Just pretend you became a Muslim." And they got released that day. I was there, and I was being shot at in the house that I was at that night. And I tell you what, man, I was scared to death.
I wouldn't. I'm surprised. Yeah. But the thing about it is that the video said, as you clearly know, that they both said they were not forced, that they were doing this freely. And meanwhile, if I recall correctly, weren't there guns pointed to them in the video itself? If they weren't, then they were certainly under the threat of death. But see, the idea that they were not forced was not just a lie. It comes from the different idea of what constitutes compulsion. They were perfectly free to reject Islam, but if they rejected Islam, they'd be killed. They were free to choose to be killed. There was no compulsion in religion. They could have decided that they would rather die, but that was the choice that they had. So what Shabir Ali is doing here is relying on the fact that most Westerners will never think about it that way and never dream of thinking that somebody who's got a gun pointed to his head is not being forced, when actually they were not being forced, because they could have just decided, okay, it's time to die. Not only that, I should also add that a lot of Islamic scholars say that 256 is abrogated under the principle of abrogation.
9-5.
Verse 106, it is abrogated by the passages that say, fight, like 839, fight them until religion is all for Allah. If you're going to keep fighting the infidels until religion is all for Allah, then obviously you cannot stop fighting and say, well, we can't force you to become Muslim. You have to keep fighting until religion is all for Allah. So you kill those who refuse, or you subjugate them as dhimmis, and you fight on until religion is all for Allah, or that the hegemony of Islam is extended everywhere.
Dude, you know what? That was one of the best moments for Fox News ever. You know why?
Why?
I was watching that day. I was watching the news so close because I was stuck in my house, and the Israelis were on one side, jihadis on the other side, and I was in the Gaza Strip, and my house was surrounded. I was so scared, but I was watching the news, and you know what happened that day? It was the biggest black eye for CNN in the world because CNN, you know where CNN was? They were outside the Arabs' border. This means they were outside of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't able to go in because of what was going on. But Fox News had two guys inside Gaza who had been kidnapped and had been released. And so these Fox News guys are being released, and CNN is standing there like, oh yeah, look at these Fox News guys. Oh yeah, they're being released. Look at their cars moving. And so CNN was forced to do this thing, showing that Fox News was way more involved, way more bring you the news from inside, you know, the actual news story than CNN was. So it was a big black eye for CNN. So that was a great thing. So, but the fact that he went and said that he became Muslim, that, you know, I actually know the guy who was doing the kidnapping negotiations, and they said, just to save face for these jihadis, just pretend that you became a Muslim. That was his you know, it was a friend of mine that did that. I can't believe it. But anyway, you opened that up. So anyway, let's go ahead and listen to Shabir Ali some more. Comedy Network here.
You are actually holding him, compelling him to remain in the faith. That would be contrary to the Quran.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Shabir. You can visit our website.
That's contrary to the Quran. And you know, this is where I'm thinking, dude, this is when we need some more follow-up questions. But she's totally like CNN, right? When you get to the meat of the thing, that's, oh, we just ran out of time. Time for a commercial, Snickers commercial, you know.
Well, it is her father. She doesn't want to show him up.
Oh, that's her father?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she was the host of the show for a long time. Now they have a different host. A few years back, they replaced her. But if you look at the very beginning of the clip, you'll see that her name is Ali, and she spells it like he does, A-L-L-Y, because, of course, she's his daughter.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, since we got you, and since you kind of brought this up, I'd like to go ahead and play the Qaradawi, just so that you can tell me if my head is safe through the weekend here or not. So, you know, Yusuf Qaradawi, this guy, man, this guy's hilarious.
That's one way to look at it.
هناك إسلام كان انتهى الإسلام منذ وفقوا لم يتركوا الردة. لو تركوا الردة ما كان هناك إسلام. كان انتهى الإسلام منذ وفاة الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام.
Okay, I just want to say this, what he just said is the exact opposite of what Shabir Ali said.
Yeah.
Shabir Ali said you can't have the sword over their head or else there's no freedom of religion. He's just saying if you don't have the sword over your head, there'll be no Islam.
Well, not only that, he's saying that Islam would have been finished right after the death of the Prophet. He's referring to the Ridda Wars, the Wars of Apostasy, where Arabia essentially, this is according to Islamic tradition, left Islam right after Muhammad died, and then Abu Bakr fought wars to force them all back into Islam. And so you either have to, if you believe Shabir Ali, then you have to believe that the first rightly guided caliph, Abu Bakr, misunderstood Islam right after the death of Muhammad, whom Abu Bakr blindly followed, and that he forced these people back into Islam, even though the Quran told him that there was freedom of religion. And so Shabir Ali knows that he's lying through his teeth, but he's counting on the fact that most people who watch the show don't know.
Wow. You know, yesterday I did a video with showing Zakir Naik and then and Shabir Ali, just to show that it doesn't seem like anybody knows what this death penalty, or they twist it in different ways. And the thing about Zakir Naik and is that Zakir Naik, it's hilarious, but it's so long I don't want to show it. But I actually made up a certificate for him, a dance contest certificate, because he dances so beautifully around. And I played the whole thing. It's like almost 10 minutes long of him dancing around the subject. He said, if a teacher comes to your school and he says, a math teacher, and he says 2 + 2 = 3, how are you going to let him come and teach your kids? You know, and he's comparing that to you know, cutting people's heads off for changing their religion. And so it was hilarious. But anyway, let's see a little bit more of what Qaradawi says. Even though Qaradawi doesn't really say anything, he just completely admits everything. So anyway, let me just play this.
فالوقوف أمام الردة هو الذي أبقى الإسلام. وفي آية المائدة إنما جزاء الذين يحاربون الله ورسوله ويسعون في الأرض أن يقتلوا أو يصلبوا. جاء عن أبي قلابة وغيره من التابعين إن هذه جاءت في المرتدين، وجاءت أحاديث كثيرة، مش حديث واحد ولا اثنين ولا ثلاثة، أحاديث كثيرة عن عدد من الصحابة يعني في أن يقتل المرتد. حديث
you know, there's one thing he said here that where he's applying that verse, you know, Obama's favorite verse in the Quran. Do you know Obama's favorite verse in the Quran?
532. You ever kill an innocent person, it's as if you've killed the whole world.
Well, he's using the verse that's right after that, you know, which is,
cut off their hands and feet on opposite sides and crucify them and all that.
Yeah, and
Obama never quoted that, oddly enough.
Or Daniel Ellis, man, when he went on Bill Maher, even though Bill Maher gave it to him good, man. But have you ever been on Bill Maher?
No.
No, you haven't. Okay, you should be, because he, you know, he's had people like Chuck Missler, huh?
Only leftists are allowed.
Well, you know what? I think he had Chuck Missler on, and he had Ann Coulter.
Oh, Ann Coulter. He and Ann Coulter are friends. Yeah,
okay.
That's an exception.
Oh, okay.
But, anyway, he can call me. He knows where I am.
Okay, but anyway, the thing that this guy just did is he used that verse about corruption in the land. You're supposed to crucify them and cut their hands and feet off, about apostates. You know, so he's saying that all of the scholars, and he's listing Ibn Abbas and, you know, the hadith guy, he's saying that they all say that that verse, which is one of the most terrifying verses in the Quran, says you're supposed to cut their hands and feet off on opposite sides and crucify them, is about apostates. You know, so that just,
see, that's not something that is in the clear words of the verse. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that when we think back on what Shabir said, Qaradawi, obviously by invoking all these authorities to say that, he is showing that this is a mainstream understanding of this passage. But Shabir is taking advantage of the fact that it doesn't specifically say this refers to apostates in the Quran itself.
yes.
Of course, then there's the other verse that I noted before, 489, where it does say that if they turn renegade, kill them and wherever you find them. But if you take 532 and 533 as having to do with apostates, then it's even worse for them. And I expect that Shabir Ali, being a scholar of Islam, knows very well what Qaradawi is saying here and probably agrees with it. But he does not want people in the West to know this.
Mm. You know what? The Zakir Naik, when Zakir Naik was speaking about apostasy, he also used this verse. He also used this verse about apostates. So it must be common knowledge somewhere that this is about apostates, which is terrifying. Is terrifying, because that means you're supposed to cut their hands and feet off and crucify them. Even though Christian, I don't know if you know Rob Christian, but he did a great video the other day saying, if you cut their hands off, you can't crucify them. But anyway, that's just a funny thing. So anyway, well, I think we did. I just wanted to ask you a couple of things about apostasy, just because, yesterday I was just looking at some videos about apostasy, and I'm not. You know what? It's just like it's so unclear, and yet nobody will deny, not Shabir Ali, not Zakir Naik, that this is the sentence. That this is what's supposed to happen to apostates. And so the danger remains. And I know from personal experience, it doesn't matter what Shabir Ali says or Zakir Naik, that this is so ingrained in Islam.
Yes.
So,
no doubt about that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your comments about that. And so I wanted to ask you a couple of other things that you have written about. And one of the things that you've been writing about recently, and I'm really excited about, this book of yours coming back. Actually, you wrote it before, and now it's coming back.
Did Muhammad exist? Yeah.
Did Muhammad exist? And my question is if Muhammad didn't exist, and I'd like you to tell me some of the proofs, evidence, or some of the theories as to why you think he didn't exist. But if he didn't exist, what motivated the Arab conquests? Because, what we were always taught is that because of Muhammad, Islam, and that, and then what you're kind of saying is that Muhammad wasn't even really there. If he didn't really, he was created later. Well, then why did the Arabs make all those conquests then?
Well, conquest is a constant throughout human history, and all sorts of people have made conquests. And what seems to be the case is that they took advantage of a situation where they were able to conquer, because you had two great powers in those days, the Byzantines and the Persians. And the Byzantines and Persians had fought a series of wars against each other and exhausted each other. And so the Byzantines didn't even have enough troops to man all the garrisons around Arabia, as well as in North Africa. So the Arabs saw the opportunity and took over the Middle East and North Africa. And they saw that Persia was weak and took over Persia. And then they needed a religion, because they were creedally vague monotheists, but they didn't have any particular religion of their own. And in those days, religions are what held together a political entity, so that you had the Byzantines being Christian and the Persians Zoroastrian, and the Arabs were what? They made Islam. And they made it martial and warlike and violent and aggressive in order to inculcate those values into the people, so that their empire would be strengthened. It's just the kind of religion you would expect a bunch of warlords to invent, because they want the empire to be protected and to expand. Now, why do I think that instead of the standard story? Because if you look at the 7th century records when Muhammad is supposed to have lived, and the aftermath, when these Arab conquests are happening, and like you say, they're supposed to have been inspired by Muhammad. They're supposed to have happened because of Muhammad. And yet there's no mention of Muhammad anywhere. There are like 2 mentions of Muhammad in 7th century material, and neither of them are about the Prophet of Islam, because one of them says he was fighting against the non-Muslims and non-Arabs. They didn't even call them Muslims, but fighting against the people in Syria, which, according to Islamic tradition, the conquest of Syria took place after Muhammad died. And another said that he was proclaiming the coming Messiah. Well, Muhammad does not proclaim a coming Messiah in the Islamic literature. So neither of those Muhammads, those are mentions of Muhammad that a lot of Islamic apologists, I bet Shabir Ali would point to those and say, see, there was mention of Muhammad in the 7th century, so this is not true. And yet neither of them are obviously the Prophet of Islam. So what is the real record? If we look at the 7th century literature, there isn't any Muhammad or Islam or the Quran. For example, there's a famous story, I'll bet you've heard it, Sophronius of Jerusalem, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the Christian, he was welcoming the Caliph Umar into Jerusalem in the late 630s when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem. And he took him around the city, and he showed Umar all the churches, and he showed him the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus is supposed to have risen from the dead, and he invited him to go inside and pray there. And Umar magnanimously refused, and he said, if I go in there and pray, my followers will claim the place for a mosque, and I want to leave it for you Christians. And this is quoted to this day as an indication of Islam's tolerance, right?
I'm Palestinian. I've heard that all my life. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. That's a 9th century story, and there is no record of it in any 7th century source or 8th century source. And not only that, but the 7th century, in the 7th century, we have a lot of writings of Sophronius himself. He wrote sermons, and we still have them. He wrote various other kinds of literature, and we still have it. He wrote a great deal, and it was preserved. And he writes a great deal about the conquest. He writes about, he's trying to understand how God could have allowed this, and whether it was because of sin or whether it was because of something else. And he writes about how the invaders came and they destroyed the churches and so on. And never once does he call them Muslims. And never once does he mention Islam. And never once does he say they had a new prophet or they had a new holy book. He doesn't even mention Umar.
Wow.
And not only that, but every non-Muslim source, and there are plenty, that mention the conquests in the 7th century doesn't mention Muslims or Islam or the Quran. The Quran is supposed to have been codified and distributed by Uthman in 656, right? So yet nobody quotes it. There's no quote of it anywhere. And
a whole story about burning the Quran and all that stuff.
Those stories are 9th century stories. The first quotes that we have of the Quran are in the Dome of the Rock on the wall that was built in 691. Now, if Uthman had really codified the Quran and distributed the copies to all the provinces in 656, and we have lots of records from both the Arab leaders and the non-Arabs who were conquered in between 656 and 691. Nobody quotes the Quran even once or even mentions that it exists. It strains credulity. Not only that, but later on, around the year 715, St. John of Damascus is one of the first Christians to write about Islam. And he actually does write about Islam. By 715, there started to be Islam. But he says, I've read your books. I've read the Quran, and I've read Surah al-Baqarah. Now, let me ask you this. If you read, Surah al-Baqarah is the 2nd chapter of the Quran. If you read a book, do you say it that way? Do you say, well, you know, I've read 1984, and I've read chapter 7. You see what I mean? It sounds more like what he's saying is he's referring to 2 separate books.
Oh.
And he also mentions other chapters of the Quran as if they're separate books.
Oh. And then they were compiled together?
They were compiled together. And there are all sorts of other strange things. Like, for example, Abdul Malik, the caliph from 685 to 705.
Yeah.
There is a tradition recorded in the Islamic literature where Abdul Malik says, I am afraid I'm going to die during Ramadan because I was born during Ramadan, I became caliph during Ramadan, and I collected the Quran during Ramadan.
Oh.
Now, wait a minute. If he knew full well that Uthman had collected the Quran 50 years earlier, then what, 40 years earlier, then why is he saying that? But if he collected the Quran, and then he said this is the work of Uthman to give it an air of authenticity, and there was no internet in those days, you couldn't Google and check, that would make sense of all these different traditions, you see. That Abdul Malik really originated the Quran. There's another tradition. Oh, these are all in the Islamic literature. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf was the governor of Iraq at the time of Abdul Malik. And there is a story of an old man who says, you know, we never read the Quran in mosques until the time of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Why not? If Uthman had given it out 40 years earlier, why weren't they reading it in mosques until 40 years later this guy comes along? Or maybe the Quran didn't exist until the guy came along.
Oh, my goodness.
It's all in the book, Did Muhammad Exist? And the revised and expanded version will be out this summer.
Wow. The, you know, the thing that, you know, because of Abdul Malik and there was also Ibn Zubair in Mecca. And
that's a big part of this story, because Ibn Zubair was rebelling against Abdul Malik. And there's some evidence that that's why the Quran and Islam became oriented to Arabia, because Ibn Zubair went to Mecca and set up shop in Mecca. And he had a considerable following. And there was a war between him and Abdul Malik won. But then there were all of Ibn Zubair's followers. What were they going to do? They could have chosen somebody else and kept on. So Abdul Malik tried to conciliate them. And so there is a very strange thing also, and this is in the new edition, the work of Dan Gibson, who you may be familiar with. He is an archaeologist. He went to a lot of early mosques all over the Islamic world, and he found that the earliest mosques don't point to Mecca. The mihrab does not point to Mecca. The notice of the direction of prayer, it points to Petra in southern Jordan. And then around the time of, actually later than Abdul Malik, the mosques start to point toward Mecca. And it seems as if what happened was Abdul Malik incorporated elements of Ibn Zubair's religion into the new religion he was creating. And so he cast it all into Arabia and Mecca, and that's where it's been centered ever since. Whereas originally it was farther to the north. As a matter of fact, the Quran is written in Arabic that was spoken farther to the north, not Meccan Arabic, not southwestern Arabian Arabic, but Arabic that was spoken in southern Syria and southern Jordan. That's where Petra is. And that's where Islam started. And so Abdul Malik put it in Mecca, pointed the prayers to Mecca to win over Ibn Zubair's followers. And there was something else. Well, maybe I'll return to it. I'm getting old, Steve. I'm sorry.
Hey, I'm getting there too. But you know, one thing that you were saying, because you know, I worked with Father Zechariah and I did a lot of translating for his stuff, and he played a video of an imam, of a sheikh or some professor at Al-Azhar University reading from Ibn Taymiyyah and from Ibn Kathir, where they say, first of all, they were talking about the donkey ride, you know, from Mecca to Jerusalem, you know, the magic donkey ride on, and they're saying that there, you know, when it says in the Quran 16:1, it says
17:1.
17:1, Subhanalladhi akhad abdahu min al-haram masjid al-haram la masjid al-aqsa, you know, that there was no masjid al-aqsa at that time.
There are non-Arabic speakers. He's saying that when the messenger was carried from the mosque, the Haram mosque, to the Al-Aqsa mosque, and of course, the Al-Aqsa mosque today is in Jerusalem, but it didn't exist at the time this is supposed to have been written. So either it was written after the Al-Aqsa mosque was built in the 690s, same time as all the rest of this, or it was referring to a different mosque altogether.
Well, you see,
Al-Aqsa is the farthest mosque, so that could be anywhere, really, farthest away from wherever you are.
Well, you know, based on what you're saying, I'm almost thinking you got to flip the story over, that the Haram was in Jerusalem and that the Al-Aqsa is the one in Mecca, that the donkey flew the other way. So, but
I don't know. I never heard that. That's a new one on me.
that's right.
I'm happy to say that I'm not totally senile yet, and I remembered the other point I was going to make, and that is very briefly, Mecca all of the hadith, the Sirah literature, the biographical information we have about Muhammad, which all dates from the 8th and 9th century, mostly from the 9th century, 200 years after Muhammad lived, or supposed to have lived, it all centers on Mecca. Muhammad was born in Mecca. He becomes a prophet in Mecca. He returns to Mecca after he goes on the Hijrah, the flight to Medina, and the emigration. And it's all Mecca. And Mecca is supposed to have been a trading center. He's supposed to have been a merchant. And people were supposed to come from all over to Mecca. There are no records of that we have lots of records of traders in the 7th century keeping their itineraries because they were keeping their sales records. Because obviously if you're a salesman, you want to know where you made sales so you can go back there. And they didn't go to Mecca. They would have had to go, if they were going from Europe to India, which they were, then they would have had to go across all these miles of trackless desert waste to get to Mecca with nothing there. No rest stops, no drink machines. And they got to get to Mecca. Otherwise, they could have just gone across through Syria and into Iraq and into Iran and India. But now the whole story is based on Mecca. It doesn't have any historical basis because Mecca was nothing, was not the trading center it's represented to be, represented to have been in the 7th century.
Mm. Wow. That just I'm beginning to hear this. I hear some stuff also from Jay Smith. He talked about this.
Great work on this.
Yes, and about the coins, the different coins and everything like that. And it's just like, it's really you begin to wonder, dude, all of these things that we were taught, that, the one thing that, like I was reading the Gospel of Luke the other day, and the Gospel of Luke, if you look in chapter 3, verse 1 of the Gospel of Luke, it says, in the 15th year of Tiberius, when he was the Caesar of Rome, when Herod was the tetrarch of this, and when this guy was the tetrarch of that, in this region, that it is so historically and geographically validated. You can go back and look. Was this guy the president or the mayor or whatever at that time? And it's so historically accurate. There's like 7 layers of validation in that verse about the time period that he was talking about. Mm-hmm. And so you got this, and the Bible is so full of eyewitnesses. And yet with the Quran, I mean, the fact that there's no records, I mean, even records, historical records of this guy Muhammad.
Yeah.
And
I would have expected Sophronius to say, and the invaders came in, which he does say, and they said they were Muslims, which he doesn't say, and they said they had this prophet Muhammad, which he doesn't say, that told them to come invade. So, and nobody else says it either. And you mentioned the coins. There are coins that the Arab caliphs minted that have crosses on them. Now, would you, if you were a believer in a religion that says that Jesus was not crucified, that was an insult to Allah to say he was crucified, and that he's going to come back and break all the crosses. Your prophet said this, and you know that it's in the records, and then you make a coin with a cross on it. That doesn't make any sense. But maybe if all those things were devised after you made the coins with the crosses on them, then makes sense.
That kind of makes it almost difficult to speak about, some of the other things that I wanted to ask you about, because the stuff that I want to ask you about is all from the Hadith.
You have to be clear. It's very important to know what's in the Hadith, and it's very important to know the life of Muhammad as in the Islamic texts. None of these things we're talking about the history affects that, because Muslims believe those things, and we need to know what they believe because they act on what they believe. Okay. And so you can only understand them by knowing that material. But that doesn't mean that it's historically accurate, and we don't have to say it's historically accurate. It's just like if we were talking about the Shakespeare play Macbeth. We could say Macbeth says this, Macbeth did that, but that doesn't mean any of it happened. It's a play. And so say Muhammad said this, Muhammad did that, Muhammad married the 9-year-old and all that, because it's in the Islamic literature, but that doesn't mean any of it really happened.
Well, one thing I did want to ask you, and it's kind of like probably the last question that I want to ask you, and you know, and it's really because it's a subject today in the world today, and it's relevant to today, and that was the development of Muhammad's relationship with the Jews and the Christians, his first interactions with them, and then what happened to where we're in the situation we're in right now, according to the hadith.
Muhammad originally proclaimed that he was a prophet in the line of the biblical prophets, that his teaching was no different from the teaching that Moses had received in the Torah and that Jesus had received in the gospel, and that they are just being obstinate, the Jews and the Christians, by rejecting his message. And they not only are obstinate in rejecting his message, but evil because they actually edited their own scriptures in order to erase all mention of him and his coming, and to obscure the correspondence between his message and the message of their scripture. That is standard mainstream Islamic teaching. Am I right?
Yes.
You probably learned this when you were a young man. And this is based on the Quran. The Quran tells Muhammad in chapter 10, verse 94, if you are in doubt concerning what we have revealed to you, then go and ask the people of the book, which assumes that at the time that Muhammad is getting these revelations, or whoever is being addressed is getting these revelations, that the Jews and Christians, actually the people of the book that is, actually have the uncorrupted scripture. So this Islam completely falters on this because, of course, the Jewish and Christian scripture has not been altered. And we have copies of it from before the time of Islam's advent. So it all falls apart on that basis. But it is clear the Quran assumes that it confirms the earlier revelations and tells Muhammad or whoever, because it actually only mentions Muhammad by name 4 times, and none of those are very specific mentions either. It tells him to go check with them if he's wondering about whether what he's getting is true. And then Muslims did check, and they found it was different. They could have either said, oh, I guess we were wrong, and gone home, but that was unlikely. It was much more likely, of course, that they would do what they did, which was to charge that the Jews and Christians had corrupted their scriptures, and that is what Muslims assume today.
Wow. Dude, you know, because I grew up with all this, you know, this is what I was taught, you know, but when you actually see it in the when you see it in context with what really happened historically, it just makes sense. And you know what I really appreciate, there was a couple of things that you really said today that I really appreciate. Number one, that you brought back that memory from Gaza. Dude, I was in the house. I was so scared, and I was watching the news. And I remember when that guy went up and he put his fingers up and said, I became a Muslim today. That scared me so bad because I was a Christian missionary. They knew I was an ex-Muslim, and I was there in the middle of the battle when that happened. I was so scared. Huh?
I'm glad you got out.
I tell you what, man, I had a friend who sent the U.S. Embassy to come get me because I was in Gaza at that time. I wasn't allowed to leave because Israel, they blocked me from leaving for a year. I was in there when Hamas took over. And so I better say that or they're going to give me algorithm issues. But so just to remember that and to, but another thing you said that I really appreciated, which I think maybe is a source, it might be a problem for some others too, is the fact that we're beginning to hear more and more that Muhammad may not have even existed. And okay, let's go there. Let's see what the evidence, where it leads. But the problem then becomes, well, then what do we do with all this stuff in the hadith and all in the Quran and everything like that? You know, because, you know, all these stories that we've been, you know, studying for years.
They're all legends. They're all myths. I mean, Bukhari, right? The story about Bukhari is that he collected 600,000 hadith and rejected 593,000 as inauthentic. I think he was right about the 593,000, but he was wrong about the 7,000. They were inauthentic too. And you see, the thing about the hadith is that they're all 9th century stories. There's no record of them existing before that. But it's very important we know them. We can't just say none of this happened and dismiss it, because this is the Islamic faith.
Wow, wow. You see, you kind of gave us, you kind of showed us, you showed me how to walk those two lines at the same time. You know, that Muhammad didn't exist, but we can still use the hadith and the Quran.
But he married Aisha when she was 9.
Yeah.
Or he raped Aisha when she was 9. He married her when she was 6.
You know what? It's like, it's like some people, I got in trouble for saying that. You know, I got in bad trouble with my family for saying that. But you know,
sorry,
it's there, you know, and it's like
multiple attestation. It's very clear that, and I also have a collection at Jihad Watch of all sorts of Islamic scholars all over the world saying there's no minimum age for marriage because of Muhammad and Aisha. So it's very clear. It's another one of those things like apostasy law. It's taken for granted in the mainstream.
Wow. And yet the media is just, yay, you know, and it's like, you know, yeah. Well, for next time I have you on, I'm just going to kind of give you a warning about what it's going to be, is that I've been watching some of your CNN interviews. And so
I haven't been on CNN in years.
Yeah, but they're meaty, man. There's some, I love it when they try to corner you. And
well, you know, I don't even remember. You're going to have to refresh my memory. I don't remember anything I ever discussed on CNN. I remember being there one time. I remember being there. You know, Mike Ditka, I don't know if you follow football at all, but Mike Ditka was a football coach, a famous football coach. And I was standing there at CNN waiting to be led into the studio. And the elevator door opened up. Maybe some people who are watching this will know who Mike Ditka was or is. I don't know if he's still alive even. But anyway, he was standing there in the open elevator. And I saw him and I was kind of shocked, you know, wasn't expecting to see him. And I said, "Hey, you're Mike Ditka." Very intelligent thing to say, I know. And he said, he pointed at me in the same way and said, "Hey, you're that guy." And, and then the doors closed to the elevator. And I thought, what am I in a Seinfeld episode now? But anyway, that's my main memory of being at CNN. I don't even remember any of the shows.
Well, there was one, the snarky left-wing, you know, guy that's there. You were doing it with a guy and a girl. It was after the attack in Texas. And then the guy,
his water, he got mad. I was sitting there in the studio. You know, it's a very small set. You know, television makes everything look bigger.
I know.
So if you actually go to a television set, it's very a studio. It's very small, and so it seems like you're far away when you're chatting with these people, but you're actually right up next to them.
Oh.
So I was here, and the CNN guy was to my left, and the girl was to his left, and there was a mug full of water in front of me, and it's hot, and I'm a bit nervous, and so I grabbed the mug and down the water, and then he's looking at me because it was his water.
Oh,
so maybe they were tough because he said about the water.
Well, there's this one part in it where you know, the thing happened, and the guy was asking about Pamela Geller, and then you had said that, you know, these guys had come out to get Pamela Geller, and the guy, the snarky guy, says, "Oh yes, but the Boston police said they weren't really after Pamela Geller. That was just wishful thinking. Wishful thinking. You know, they were just after Boston policemen." And
No,
but you came. Go ahead. Do you remember that?
Yeah, this was you're referring to an attack that happened after the Garland cartoon contest where ISIS jihadis tried to kill us all.
Yes.
And then there was a group in Boston, a group of Muslims in Boston who hatched a plot to go to New York and behead Pamela Geller. And they actually were jailed for this plot. And it was very clear in all the court records that they wanted to kill Pamela Geller. But what happened was one of them, a man named Usama Rahim, he got impatient. And he was standing there in Boston on the street somewhere, and a policeman came by and he attacked the policeman.
Oh.
And so that's why the CNN guy was saying that. But
wishful thinking.
Nicholas Rovinsky and David Wright, who were converts to Islam, they were very clear, and so was Usama Rahim before he died, that the plot was to go to New York and kill Pamela Geller. And he messed it all up by attacking the policeman instead.
Yeah. But the way you responded to it, I thought was great, because you said, what you said is, oh, it was no joke. It was no joke, and it definitely wasn't wishful thinking. They were after Pamela Geller. You said it twice, and the guy just like shuts up, with the girl next to him. But anyway, now
from not having water.
That was a great interview, man, because you really got a couple of punches in. But anyway, we've had you on here for an hour. It's a great blessing to have you on, and to just to catch up, get a reality check, and to talk about some things that have been kind of spinning in my mind, in regard to apostasy. That's been a big deal for me lately, just thinking about that, and just the confusion about it, the fact that each sheikh seems to say something different, and yet, and I don't know if you saw the video with Ali Dawah, where
I know the one you mean. Yeah.
I mean, he's a clown.
Each sheikh says something different based on who they're talking to. And Zakir Ali, he's talking to Muslims, but he's in Canada, and he knows non-Muslims can easily get hear what he's saying. He's speaking in English and so on, and so he is essentially speaking for non-Muslims to hear. Right. But if he were speaking in Arabic to other Muslims, I expect he would be saying something very different.
Yeah, like Qaradawi said, so very boldly and unashamedly so. Anyway, I thank you so much. When is your book going to come out? Or has it already come out?
No, the Did Muhammad Exist will be out in July.
Okay.
And the Critical Quran in November.
Critical Quran.
The Critical Quran. I'm very proud of this. I'm just finishing it up. And I got to tell you, I'm very happy with it. And I know people say, well, you wrote it, you dope. Of course you're happy with it. No, actually, I'm not happy with all my books. I'm not going to tell you the ones I don't like. But this one, this one is going to be, I hope, the go-to Quran for people who want to know what Islam is all about, why it's problematic, why there's so much violence, and also the problems with the Quranic text, which have never been made available to non-specialists in English before.
Could you give us an example of some of the problems?
Well, I tell you, I was just putting in some interesting stuff about the Hafs and the Warsh recensions. Hafs and Warsh are two different manuscript traditions of the Quran. Somebody like Shabir Ali or Yasir Qadi would say that the Quran is perfect. That one of the signs of its perfection is that one of the signs that it's from Allah is that it's never been changed. That there are all sorts of variations in biblical manuscripts, and the Quran is perfect. Every copy of the Quran is exactly like every other copy, and always has been. And I've seen, I quote several people saying this in the book just to show that this is standard Islamic belief. But the reality is that there are quite a few variants. I put as many as I could. There were actually many more that I didn't put in because they would have entailed a lot of explanation of the grammar or something like that. And I want this to be clear and easy to understand in English. But the Hafs, Hafs is in North Africa, right? And I mixed them up. And the Warsh is the main one that was canonized at Cairo and spread around, and people think as the Quran. In 1924, Al-Azhar codified the worst tradition and published a Quran that has essentially become the Quran, that everybody agrees on the text. But that is only from 1924. And meanwhile, there are other Qurans. There's another tradition, the Hafs, that still continues to be distributed in North Africa. And there are other traditions as well, ancient manuscripts full of differences. Now, most of these differences are pretty minor. But the fact that they exist at all, that's the point. So a lot of Islamic apologists will say, oh, yeah, but I warned versus he warned. What's the big deal? It's not important. That's not the point. They said the text was perfect and unchanging in every copy.
Every dot, every the
diacritic marks.
Everything.
If people don't know about in Arabic, that a lot of the letters are identical to other letters in how they're written, except for the diacritical marks, the dots above or below them. And so the thing about the early Quran is the earliest copies of the Quran, they don't have the dots. So you can actually make it say all kinds of different things, and people have done that. As a matter of fact, I can give you one very nice example that I like a lot from the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, the beginning of chapter 2 of the Quran, the longest and most important chapter of the Quran. It starts out by saying, this is the book, there is no doubt in it. And
هذه الكتاب ليس شك فيها or something like that.
What is it? Raiha? Fihi? There's no I don't remember the Arabic, I'm sorry. But somebody read it with the wrong diacritical marks, where he took the R for the Z and all that, since they look the same. So he read there's no oil in it.
Z.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. R Z. Oh. Dude.
This is the book. There's no oil in it.
No anointing. But you know what? I got an example of this, and exactly what you're saying is this verse right here. One is from the Habs, one is from the Warsh.
Yes.
And in the Arabic, if you look at the top one, now this is the same verse, and it's about angels. And the top one says, Humma abad ir-Rahman. They are the slaves of the Most High. And the reason it's abad is because the dot is underneath, in the middle word is underneath abad. But the bottom one says, Humma ind ir-Rahman. They are with the merciful. And the reason it's ind or with is because the dot is on top. And so the dot on bottom makes him slave, the dot on top makes him with. And you know what? I have gotten into it with my cousins about this, and they told me, oh, this is the miracle of the Quran.
I mean, variants that we were told for 1,400 years didn't exist.
Exactly.
Now they're becoming known, and they're part of the miracle. Yeah, that's a good story.
Well, you know what? We were told that, and in the Quran, it says in Surah 84, from the Lawh al-Mahfud, from the preserved tablet in heaven, which one is on the Lawh al-Mahfud? This is what I ask them. Which one is on the preserved tablet? And they'll say, oh, all of them are, And so this is a great subject, man. I'm really looking forward to this Quran because, there are lots of different Qurans, and some of them are really good in the English. Oh, dude.
Yeah, other thing, that the English translations, I am convinced, a lot of the English translations of the Quran, a lot of the main ones, the popular ones, are written to confuse non-Muslims about what's in the Quran and to make it obscure instead of clear. And the book is supposed to be mubin, supposed to be clear. Yes. So, look, in this translation, it's all clear. For example, when it says jahada, this translation says wage jihad, because people understand what that is in English. It's strive or struggle, but if you say strive or struggle, people in English don't understand that means take up arms in war.
Yes.
It does mean that. Yeah. So this one says that straight out.
Wow. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really going to, because like I said, with the English, I've done a couple of programs where Quran.com, that's the big website where you go to, and you know what? Every time you put the arrow on a word, it'll give you the translation on top in English. Dude, this thing is so messed up.
Yep.
I've done several programs about how very messed up it is and how inconsistent it is. And so, we need something that shows it the way it really is. What do these words really mean? And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. So that'll be in November, you said?
Right. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, we'll look forward to having you hopefully before then. But
Okay.
it'll be the CNN. The next one is going to be the CNN because I love when you go after those guys, man. Anyway, thank you so much for being with us, and it was nice to find out that you're a fellow musician. And so, so have you recorded anything or?
No, I used to play in, there was this little trio here in town. I'm not going to say which town. And I played, it was like we would play weddings and parties and stuff. Okay. And sometimes they would give us free food. I don't remember ever getting paid money. So I don't know if that counts as being a professional. It was very low level. And I tell you, one time, I played the soprano saxophone. The soprano saxophone, a lot of people don't know what it is. It's a saxophone that's a little bit higher register than the tenor or the alto sax that people know of. And a saxophone, those have the bell that curves up. But a soprano saxophone is just straight, like a clarinet.
Oh.
So only it's gold brass like a saxophone. Okay. So I was playing it once and at this party. And the whole it was incredible because it was this huge hall, a big hall, and everybody was way down at the other end where the food was.
Okay.
No attention to us whatsoever. And we're way up here playing away and, really just having fun ourselves. And the piano player was the leader of the band, and he started a blues, and we were playing the blues for the longest time, just standard B-flat blues. And this guy comes up, walks away from the huge, from the crowd that was so far away, and makes his way through the huge hall up to where we were. And he's standing right in front of me, and he's looking at me while I'm playing. And I thought, man, I'm really doing good now. This is it. I have arrived. And then he looks at the soprano sax and says, "What is that thing?"
Wow.
Musician.
Wow, that's great, man. Well, if you ever bring it on, I'm sure we'd all love to hear you play. So
I played it for a good while.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for being on. The Lord bless you and protect you, be with you, and we're looking forward to hopefully have you on again soon when it's convenient for you. So
okay, I look forward to it myself. Thanks a lot.
God bless you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks, everybody. It's always a blessing when he comes on. We learn so much about so many different things, because he's got such amazing knowledge. Just, that's sometimes I like to watch his videos and just the stuff that how he put so much knowledge in one head. He's got so much knowledge and in his books, and the way he's been persecuted and the way that he's been really, the stuff that they've said about him in the media, especially CNN, and yet he continues to do what he feels that he needs to do. And so anyway, thank God for him. And for anybody who's watching, if you don't have Jesus in your heart, you need to do that right now. Just forget everything else. Ask Jesus into your heart. Say, Jesus, help me. Jesus, forgive me. Jesus, come into my heart. Jesus, help me. Jesus, forgive me. Jesus, come into my heart. Jesus, help me. Jesus, forgive me. Jesus, come into my heart. يسوع ساعدني. يسوع سامحني. يسوع ادخل قلبي. يسوع ساعدني. يسوع سامحني. يسوع ادخل قلبي. He loves you. I love you. Thank you, everybody who was with us. A lot of you were with us the whole time. I appreciate that. God bless you and have a great day. And we'll see you hopefully tomorrow. The Lord be with you. Good day.